if everyone can start making their way to the seats, that would be awesome. Excuse me, class. Class is in session. Welcome everybody to the Jersey City Tech Meetup collaboration with Koding Kurriculum. We're going to look at the future of EdTech tonight. So thank you all so much for coming. Give yourselves a round of applause for just making it out for this awesome occasion. Yeah. So just to kind of kick it off, I just want to thank Keanu and Anco for having us here. They're always so great to us. It's an awesome space. So thank you all, Keanu, for having us. We appreciate it. Give Anco a round of applause, everyone. Let's get the noise going. Woo! Yeah, Joe with the one hand slap. I like it. We'd also like to thank our other sponsor, Salvation Wellness. That's Kia right here. I'm just going to say a few words about what they do, and she's got some goodies for you as well.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Hey.
So I'm the owner of Salvation Wellness. You might know it if you're in town as Need Therapeutics or changing. So what we do here with Jersey City Tech is you guys get involved and we give you awesome wellness stuff that usually has some kind of CBD in it. Today we have CBD soaps. And what happens is you ask a good question and then I chuck this at your face. And it's really bad. So what happens is so we're gonna role play right now, right? So I'm gonna be talking, right? I'm like Koding Kurriculum and I'm telling you all this amazing stuff and you're like, whoa, tell me more. And then you have an awesome question.
Hi.
And then.
Can you please tell me more?
Yes. And then I throw it horrifyingly bad at your face. It's a lot of fun. I won't throw it that hard, I promise.
Just make sure you keep your hands
up. All of our soaps are organic. I make them. I'm an aromatherapist and herbalist. I'm also a massage therapist, meditation leader, and yogini. So everything that we do is ethical. It's biodynamically sourced. And if you have any more questions about it, you can ask me or look at the package that I'm throwing to you. Awesome, thanks. I'm gonna go get this.
And lastly, I'd like to thank Joseph Cameron. If for any of you who follow us on social media, he's the guy who makes all the awesome. Yeah, round of applause for Joe. He's a social media expert, graphic design, just everything. He kind of just keeps it all together. So if you have any needs for your businesses in social media or graphics, just talk to Joe and we'll work with you, make it happen. Real quick, who thinks they came here from the furthest away from Jersey City? That's what. Where are you from?
Shirley, New York, Long Island.
Oh, nice. Welcome. Oh, we got another.
New Brunswick, New Jersey.
Okay.
Nice. All right.
All right. Well, thank you for coming out all the way to Jersey City. This is big. Is this everyone's first Jersey City Tech meetup? Anyone been here before?
Yep.
First. Thank you guys for coming out. Anyone been to these meetups before? Thanks for coming again. For those who've been here before and those who are coming for the first time, we appreciate you coming out. We have a really awesome night ahead of us. Just one more partner I wanted to mention is Startup Station. Victoria's not with us tonight, but if you are looking for finance advice and consulting for your startup, you can visit the Startup Station, and she's got a lot of courses that kind of help you to finance your business. All right, so without further ado, let's get this night kicked off. I want to pass the torch to Carl from the Koding Kurriculum to kind of set the pace for the night and let us know what we're going to be looking at. So give him a round of applause, everyone. Woo!
Thank you. Thank you to JC Tech Meetup for partnering with us to make this happen. Koding Kurriculum is an educational technology company that uses community and content and coaching and code to help educators come closer to the technological world. And I'm a computer science by trade. My wife is a teacher, and I've learned a lot from her. But a couple years ago, I thought to myself, I wanted to, teach people how to code, and that was like a really simple idea, and it worked well. I absolutely loved doing it. But then I thought to myself, I want to be able to do more. I love education. I love school. I love helping people in the way that I know how to do it. That's through technology. And luckily I have my wife to help me understand how teachers operate in a classroom. And I feel like the community can become better stronger as children grow up in an age where technology, every year, something new is coming out. And we've reached a point where technology is growing so fast that by the time you're done with the school year, it's already changed. And previous years haven't had to deal with that. So like we're kind of reaching unprecedented territory. And I feel like, at least from my perspective, it's going to take other computer scientists and technologists and people from different professions and educators to really understand the problem of how do we educate our kids. I just had a little one. She's here tonight. She's like eight weeks old. Yeah, she's the youngest member of the night to come. It's okay. But I think to myself, you know, she's gonna be a part of the elementary education at some point, a couple years. And I think to myself, like, what's life gonna be like for her? And the truth is, you don't know. Like, nobody here truly knows. It's an ongoing conversation because technology changes every single year. So we have several panel members who were nice enough to come and join us tonight. As Koding Kurriculum, you know, not only do I try to help by creating technological content for like sessions, educating people, and getting it into the classroom, into businesses, basically anywhere I can get my hands on that I can help somebody learn a little bit more about how technology can affect their life. I think the most enjoyable thing that we've set up over the last year are these community events. I've been lucky enough to partner with Ben for this one. We've done a few on our own. And the idea is that every month we're tackling different subjects. Coming up in the future, within the next couple months, we're going to do some events on data, information. We have a couple of really good contacts who think about how data affects education and kids, people. My daughter likes that. We're going to talk about the digital divide. If you're not familiar with it, there are places in the world right now that don't have access to a computer. In fact, they don't even have access to a book, which is kind of crazy. I know because my wife and I also help out with another nonprofit to help bring education to remote parts of the world. Education is very special to us. And so without further ado, I want to bring up our list of panelists. We have 5 of them from schools in the community. We have people who are in the industry of building software. We have people who are in the profession of holding after-hour or after-school groups for kids. And so, like, we have different perspectives, and I think that this is going to be a fantastic panel. If you guys wouldn't mind, please give a round of applause to them. They're going to be introducing themselves when we get up there. We're gonna talk about it. Woo! Yeah, come on, guys. Come on up to the panel couch.
There's another mic over there.
Okay, there's a mic over there. We're getting cozy on the panel couch.
I might need another seat. Let's see.
One more seat?
Yeah, one more seat.
I'm good to stand if it's all right.
Here, you can use this.
You could have she's got line legs.
It's long legs.
Thanks, Kia. That's a great sponsor over there, guys.
Thank you.
And you guys got the mic up there. So.
Yeah, mic is over there. Are you guys comfortable?
It's going to be a nice workstation.
So thank you. Thank you for coming out.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. All right. We up here we have their names.
Except for Felix. There's been a little
Except for Felix. He wasn't able to make it tonight, and that's okay. So I'm going to start with Mac Adam Smith. If you wouldn't mind, please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, my name is Mac Adam. I'm the director of the Content Creators Academy, which is an after-school program for 8th to 12th grade students throughout Jersey City. We do classes, workshops in digital design, marketing and media, and entrepreneurship. So it's a free after-school program for students interested in those fields. We do small workshops, bringing technology into the classrooms, oftentimes for students that don't have access to that kind of technology otherwise. Try to work with them on learning the programs and the technology, how to use that, but also tying it to the local business community and partnering with local business mentors so they learn about the professional side of using technology as well.
That's great. Thank you for coming. All right, and sitting next to them we have Andrew. Andrew, welcome. If you wouldn't mind, yeah, you can use. Is it on?
Hello. Hi, I'm Andrew Fernandez. I'm the co-founder and CTO of Sawyer. We're a technology platform and marketplace for parents to find educational opportunities for their children. So we work with both sides. The parents looking for things like you just described, as well as, you know, extracurriculars and tutoring and summer camps and after-school programs. But we built a software platform to help these educators run their businesses, their nonprofits. We work with schools, and really the whole premise of Sawyer is to try to make this entire ecosystem of education sort of have an infrastructure of technology, so that way we can get it into schools. We tend to stay outside of school, so out of school, after school, but because all parents who use Sawyer can move in between all of the different places where their children go, they really have one place to sort of manage the complexity that is their child's education over their entire life.
That's great.
And I'm an engineer, so.
Nice, so much.
In case there's technology questions.
Thank you. And sitting next to him is my wife, Kristen Haviland.
Hi, I'm Kristen. I am not a software. I don't want those questions. Or an engineer, excuse me. I am an educator in Jersey City Public Schools, and I volunteer my time with Koding Kurriculum. I love teaching students in any way I can, helping them get better in any way, and I also love doing that for teachers and for educators in general. So when I'm at school, I get to do that with students and with the teachers, but through Koding Kurriculum, I find that I can help educators get better with technology, which a lot of educators have some fear of. They can get better in that aspect, and I get to help do that and also be a part of the community.
Thank you. And sitting next to her is Tasha.
Hi, my name is Tasha Mosconi, and I'm an assistant principal at a charter school in Somerset. We're a K-12 district, and my main responsibilities are developing and implementing the curriculum for all courses K-12, and part of that is not only figuring out how we can integrate technology into our curriculum, because obviously that's the forefront of education, but also training our teachers on how to utilize the technology to make their lives easier, to help the students and teach them on new innovative strategies and things of that nature. So those are my main goals.
Thank you. Can you guys hear? Is it coming through? Okay, good. And then sitting next to her is Michael.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Mike from Pico Turbine International. Right now, we created an ecosystem that is known as the Pico ecosystem. Pico Tech Institute is our school, and that's where we create our curriculum. We educate teachers and students. And we also have Pico Solutions, where we actually learn from professionals such as General Motors, etc., and we trickle that down into our curriculum. And then we have Pico Now, where we actually have created products for over the past 10 years for the tech ed market and provide those to schools. Ultimately, we create an ecosystem where students can actually materialize their imagination to the fullest, and we also not only teach them about the new technologies in the 21st century, but also educate them on becoming leaders, their communication skills, and their social skills in general, in order to enhance those elements for their their life in general.
Mike, I'm going to ask you the first question, buddy. You hang out on the mic.
Did I already get into it?
Yeah, that's right. So the number one question that I wrote down when I was thinking about the future of education was, what do you think could be the most impactful technology today that affects the classrooms of tomorrow?
So the number one change that I'm seeing in the marketplace in which we're right now riding the wave is that we're actually doing virtual teaching. So we've created a virtual TA program that we're not only doing that around Hudson County, but we're now in the Oranges, et cetera, and actually testing it out in China, et cetera. But ultimately, that's a number one thing that we're doing. But everybody's focusing mostly on the technologies rather than enhancing the kid skills. The soft skills are really what helps the students actually take it to the next level. You can meet a million engineers, but if they have those soft skills, if they're leaders, they can communicate, and they can take things to the next level, that's way more powerful than just teaching them a technology. Because if they have the aptitude, they already got that down. They'll take it from there.
That's a great answer. Anybody want to add on to that? Any other technologies? You know, when I think about, I'll add my 2 cents.
Happy to hear it.
Yeah. So you said virtual classroom. Are you thinking in terms of like distance learning?
Yeah, so distance learning is one way of looking at it. Right now we're using Google Hangout, but right now I'm working on some funding to actually create a new software in order to enhance it even more.
Yeah. Well, what do you guys think about, like, I don't know, virtual teachers? So like you have a teacher in a classroom and you have maybe like Alexa or Siri, you know, being able to do different commands and whatnot. I mean, do you think things like that are possible within the classroom?
Yeah, I think so. And I think students are probably quicker to adapt to that kind of learning than we are as the teachers. I think they grow up so much with it. It's such an integrated part of their lives that I'd have to imagine that more and more it'll become, they won't notice a difference, you know. I think that is probably where we're going in some ways. That being said, I don't want to discount at all the importance of face-to-face interaction, and that technology is a tool and a very important tool, but not necessarily a replacement for the kind of one-on-one learning that a teacher in a classroom provides.
Yeah. Andrew, what about like the parents involved? I mean, like, you're setting up a platform for parents to interact with like the system itself. Like,
yeah, I mean, so, you know, some things that we see are that parents are very much invested in the face-to-face because they want that higher touch experience for their kid. You know, that it's an extracurricular activities, an after-school program. We've heard, and this is all anecdotal from, you know, various businesses that we work with and schools, that that in-person experience creates sort of a love of learning. That there's always going to be students who are self-drivers, but for those who aren't, who, you know, can get lonely while they're doing these things, like that in-person experience is very important. Which is why, like, I think I agree with you. There's like a blend of where that works. And just to add, like, in non-school and career, you can work on a project completely by yourself for 2 months and it won't launch, because if you had another person there with you, and they might be virtual, but there's something about that peer learning experience that translates into the sort of like the future, the career part of their life, and teaching that early on, that like you can't just learn by yourself all the time. Not everything can be done that way. Is, I think, a good skill to learn at that point.
That's a great insight. And so, actually, I'm gonna toss things over to Tasha. That's a great, like, kind of segue. I would ask, what technological skill sets do you think are the most important for students to learn that will prepare them for their future careers?
I think that's one of those things that the technology that they need in their future careers isn't even existing yet. And so if we have a freshman in high school, by the time they leave us, the technology that they're going to use in both the higher ed setting and the workplace isn't something that we could have possibly taught them. So I think that's one of the challenges is, as you had stated, not only teaching them the current software, but the skills to adapt to new software and new technologies, and kind of how to roll with that and kind of a lot of it is by experimentation and kind of student-directed learning, and that's why a lot of what we do in the classroom today is not, I'm going to stand up here and lecture, but I'm going to make you figure out the answer and have you work together as a team to do inquiry-based learning and to facilitate your own student-directed skill sets. Because again, what we're teaching now, especially as our teachers are less adept at a lot of the technologies than the students themselves, I think that we need to teach them the skill set and not necessarily the actual content.
I think that's a really good insight. As like a computer scientist, like not even somebody who sits down with kids, like I was just giving a talk this past weekend on the future of work, and my number one skill set, the number one skill I believe future workers need to have is their ability to adapt. It's just like the idea that you know, how good you are at adaptation compared to your peers is one of the most important things. And from a technological perspective, the idea of teaching somebody to code is just a tool set that allows them to adapt. It's just like, it's just one small tool that they can use. As technology changes, it's one thing that they can have in their back pocket. What do you think about that, Michael?
No, ultimately you just hit the nail on the head, no pun intended on this statement now, but every technology that we are teaching them about is a tool. These are 21st century tools. It's not about that in the long run though. It's about them and how they're going to be able to adapt and understand one main thing, problem solving. They have to be able to solve problems. Creativity is the key to anybody that wants to be successful. And that's how they get further in life.
Yeah. So my question, actually, this is gonna go to my wife, Kristen. So, how do you think that educators maintain their own comprehension of technology as the rate of change increases? Like, how are they dealing with this? How do you deal with this?
Well, I do agree with you that fear holds a lot of teachers back for even trying any kind of technology. Personally, I recommend teachers to try one new thing every year. And this is what I do. Whether it's one thing that I want to get better at or one thing I'm scared to try, I try it. And with technology, I recommend teachers use Google. You can use Google Classroom, but Google Drive. Start with that. If you're scared of trying technology, start with that because, well, Google's not going anywhere for a while. So learn that well.
Yeah. And actually, that's another really important point is that like there are these major the biggest companies in the United States right now and among the world are all technology companies.
Absolutely.
Google, Microsoft, Amazon, e-commerce. But the idea there is that there are major companies who are investing a lot of money into technological resources that it's just like it's not going away. So there are definitely good starting points for people.
Yeah, and the technology is so integrated in to our day-to-day lives as well. Like I can say at CCAJC, one thing, because we're relatively new and we're starting up, and I've been doing some research in like how should we invest in technology for our classroom? Like what's the best use of our nonprofit limited resources for technology in the classroom? And one of the things we really kind of hit upon was that students all have a phone. They have a laptop. They've got these resources already at their disposal. And one of the things we kind of decided fairly recently was that one way that we could invest in them was kind of the supplemental elements to their technology. And we actually have a nice example right here. Right? It's like, all right, they've got the phone. What can we provide them that might help them make better videos or take better pictures? Or what are the things that we can do? And it's opened up for us at least an opportunity to say, okay, we can invest, a couple $1,000s in a really nice video camera, for example, that we'll have one that'll get passed around to a bunch of students that they'll have to argue over fighting and they can only use in the classroom. Or we could get 20 of these and give the students so that they can all have access to it and have access to a lot more. And so we've been looking at ways like that as well, that because the technology changes so quickly, in a classroom, in a school setting, it's got to be incredibly frightening to even think about how to invest in that. But because it is so quick and it's expensive to do, and it's hard to get stuff that they don't have some kind of access to already. The phone might not be the best camera, but it's a pretty good camera. And is that, you know, as an investment in something beyond what that can do, really the best way to bring them more technology?
I actually have a question for the...
Yeah?
I just, out of curiosity, like the fear of bringing software to the classroom, is that like a time constraint? Because that's one of the things that I found when talking to lots of educators inside of school, outside of school, was that they already have no time, and so learning something new.
Yeah, I think that you're right. The time is 100% an obstacle. I think it's because there's this old way of thinking and a new way of thinking, and they don't really mesh well, and the teachers have a hard time in changing their thinking. That the best way to move forward is, yes, being prepared with technology and learning technology, but also shifting your mindset where you need to always adapt. You need to always learn. So I agree with what you were saying about teaching, yes, teaching technologies in the classroom, but teaching the skills that allows them to identify a problem. Fundamentals, right? Be able to articulate a need and a solution and communicate, and that's what will drive them forward. And back to your question, I think teachers need to realize that they might be the leader, but they're not doing the leading necessarily. The students are doing a lot of the leading.
You know, that it's not even just the classroom, but like business. I mean, it's like this in my work. I work. I'm also the director of applied technology at an energy management firm in Manhattan, and we have a lot of engineers at my company. And you would think an engineer-driven company would be very technology-focused, but that is not the case. Everything is very mechanical. Like they think math and mechanics, steam systems. Like their technology is just not in their language. And it is a culture shift. That's something that I do, or that I have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. And even like a profession like engineering, which you think is mathematical, you know, is very close, should be close, is not.
Yeah, and technology is so diversified now too that it's impossible for one person, one teacher, to be an expert, you know, across the variety of technological needs that a student might have. There's just no way to do it. You know, at CCAJC, that's why we work with mentors, because there's no way a teacher could know enough to cover everything that we want the students to learn throughout the year. We want to hear different voices in that, because besides not knowing all the technology, there's different uses of it. It's versatile. It's so wide-ranging. Yeah, and the students have such an innate understanding of it off the bat. They pick up things so quickly that, you know, if I'm trying to bluff my way through something to teach them something, they're pretty quick to be like, you just watched a YouTube video on this class, didn't you?
If I may add one point, a component to that. So to piggyback off what everybody's saying is, the classroom is changing from a teacher-led classroom to a student-driven. Right? It's student-driven, project-based learning. That's what we're ending up with, and that's what's going to happen. They know more about this technology, and again, their learning curve is seconds. Ours is hopefully minutes, but more or less it might be hours, right? So let's let them take control of the driver's seat for a little bit, but make sure we support them. And that's where we all end up winning in the end.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really good point. Good.
If I can just add one thing. I think that one of the strategies that we've used at my current school is teaching the teacher. So we require all of our teachers to set up a Google Classroom, because that's the classroom of the future, and it makes their lives so much easier. But a lot of our teachers, we found, were just setting it up, and then, you know, it looked really pretty for the administration team, so everybody was happy, but they weren't actually using it. So what we did on our end was we set up all of our staff meetings on Google Classroom. So it's a way for us to kind of model the behavior that we want the teachers to be demonstrating, and it's also a way for them to integrate the technology and see the technology from the student's perspective and understand how useful it is, that they can go back to a staff meeting 3 months ago and it's right there for them. They know exactly how to access whatever, you know, document we were talking about. So it's one of those things where we can really help the teachers, kind of what you were addressing, how to address that time issue, because we're all overworked and stressed, and understanding how that can actually save us time. If you spend a little time on Google Classroom and posting your assignments, then you don't have to explain for the 15th time to the 10 children in your classroom what the assignment actually is. You can say, you know, it's on Google Classroom, you can figure it out.
Accountability.
Yeah, there's some accountability. Also from the parent's perspective, it makes our life so much easier, because when they say, you never told my child about these 10 homeworks that they missed at the end of the quarter and they have an F, but they should have an A, you know, you can go back, well, everything's posted on Google Classroom. You can see that your child didn't submit anything. So it kind of just shares that accountability full circle, and just by kind of having the teachers play a role in that, I think has been really beneficial to our staff as a whole.
Well, I'm going to follow that up. This was actually a question submitted by Ben. I thought this was actually one of the better questions. Is there a point where there's just too many technologies introduced into the classroom? Like, are we going a little bit too far?
I'm not even working in a classroom, and I can say the answer is yes.
Okay.
Just because there's too many technologies in a company will ruin so many things. Yeah. Because everybody thinks technology is going to be a silver bullet, and it never works. And I'd say that as an engineer who loves trying out new technology, and I like have to hold people back all the time from trying the new thing because I think it's going to solve the problem, when in reality, 99% of the time, a Google Doc will do like most of it. And I've worked in very large companies. I worked at Amazon briefly for a while, and it was the same exact thing. Everybody wants one bullet, and I don't think that applies in schools. Sorry, I know I hijacked that.
A lot to say about that. I do. I agree. I think education swings on a pendulum, where the newest technology, the newest curriculum comes out, and all the money goes there, and they buy it, and they think it's a cure-all. And in education, we're in the business of people. There's never going to be one cure-all for anything. And then when that doesn't work, you swing to the other side, and then it's the newest thing. And I think you're right, that there's some balance.
And there's a cost in switching back and forth. No one ever, the thing that is actually the problem never gets solved, because everybody's looking for that next thing to solve that problem when it's somewhere deeper.
Right, which goes back to the student soft skills of identifying a problem and solution, and having that conversation and evaluating what's being used and what's working and what's not, and just ever changing, being able to adapt, you know. Like
I'm going to add something to that. You know, I would agree with what you both had said, and even just in business, like in outside of the classroom, you know, companies struggle with the exact same problem. Like when you bring Salesforce in, and it's going to solve all your account management problems, right?
No, it's not.
And it doesn't.
Right? Unless you have to pause everything for 3 months while you learn how to use it.
Exactly.
Or hire somebody for it.
There is the other aspect where it's just like, you know, we're all kind of just trying to figure this out on the fly, and administrators who are helping out the school districts are trying to figure it out. They want to do something, and you know, like schools don't necessarily have a whole lot of tools that they can go to in order to help the schools out. You know, there's a zero-sum game that they have to do something, and so I can see why it's difficult to try to figure out. You know, like people think that it's a silver bullet, but we're not left with a whole lot of options. You know, it's just like you could not try. You could not provide Chromebooks to the classroom. You could not do some of these things. And actually, one thing I will say is just like, just through observing my wife is like the Jersey City does a fantastic job. They have Chromebooks in their classroom. That's awesome. I remember when I was in school, and like my professor or my teacher would roll out one of those like screens where you lay flat, like the clear screen. Yeah, the projector screens, right? Like we had nothing like that. So I think that it's there is a learning curve, but I do appreciate that about the community that we have. Like it's something that you guys are very fortunate if you live here, and your kid goes through the school here. As long as my wife, she takes advantage of it. I don't know about other people, but
if I can just comment on that, we are a one-on-one Chromebook initiative too, and part of that is kind of how much technology is too much technology. When we first came out, they were all doing everything on the Chromebook. I think for the first year, I was handing out pencils because nobody knew what a pencil was anymore. To that level, they were using their Chromebooks. And now I think there's some healthy balance there, because technology is a great tool, but it's not your only tool, and you can't just Wikipedia every question that's ever asked in the classroom. Like sometimes you have to actually think and use your brain, and I think that the teachers who are using it the most effectively are doing small snippets of Chromebook use versus then small snippets of like problem-based learning and project-based learning and group work and things of that nature. I think that going total technology is a very dangerous thing, because if you think about like how often, if your phone was next to you, how often you're checking your phone, like every 3 seconds. That's how our kids are on their Chromebooks. And if you sit and watch them, they're checking their emails, they're on their Google Docs, they're talking, the new passing notes is on their Google Docs, they all share a file, and they're all talking about, oh, it's a mess. And you can see, and you can see who edited it, so you know exactly who said what about whom, and that opens up a whole new can of worms. But you think that they're taking notes, and then you look at it and you're like, why are you talking about Becky in 3rd period? Nobody knows. But so that's kind of one of those balances that you have to strike, is between using the technology as a tool and a resource, but not the only tool or resource in the classroom.
That's a great answer. So you think so what you're saying is there comes a point where it could hinder like critical thinking?
No, absolutely. If you think about every time, like if you were sitting in a classroom, every time you're asked a question, you could Wikipedia it and literally find the answer without any thought process in seconds. Yeah. If you get stuck and you're using word recognition and you don't recognize a word, you're dictionary.comming it instead of using your word recognition skills and using your root word skills and thinking the process through. It's just so easy. So yeah, it can kind of, I think one of the things that I've been seeing over the past few years is that our students, we've struggled with teaching them problem-solving skills, as you mentioned, that they're kind of don't have that resiliency to struggle through something. It's like, it's okay if you're struggling. Well, I'm not used to that. But that it's okay to kind of struggle through something and have to think and have to spend a little bit more time. We're used to this instant gratification kind of society, and they kind of need to understand that sometimes it's okay to take a step back from that.
Yeah, if I may.
Yeah.
So the number one problem with technology in general, we're talking about tech ed right now, or EdTech for that matter, but technology is addictive, right? So you have to utilize it in a way where it's not just all it is, right? The way we've designed our curriculum and our pedagogy is around the fact that there's a project manager, an engineer, designer, and a drafter, right? A drafter is old school. We don't let them use the computer. They're actually using pen and paper, or pencil and paper, for that matter. But the point is that really, realistically, only out of that group of 4, maybe 2 of them at the most are actually utilizing the computer. So they're not shitty, chatterboxes in that sense, using chats. But the point is that it's controlled. If you can control a variable in any way, shape, or form, do so. So let them actually use real-world applications outside of just technology, so they can engage in different ways and then learn those skills, those fundamentals, to take them to the next level.
Yeah. Actually, hang on to that. You had mentioned the idea of like virtual classrooms, and so I want to pose this question to you. it kind of popped into my mind just a couple days ago, and I was really interested in it, is do you think remote learning could overtake brick and mortar schools someday?
So I believe that that is, let me be very, very, very soft on this answer. So,
fair enough. It's a hard moral question.
No, I actually have given a lot of thought about this in general. I mean, I myself right now, I'm trying to start a STEM school, a middle school, and eventually a 6 through 12 STEM institute. And ultimately, where they graduate with actually an associate's or greater degree in 3 different tracks, right? But that's still brick and mortar. But I still have the other side where I believe that is the case. But if you're missing one element, which is a teacher, right? You have that authoritative figure, right? That's extremely important. One of our clients is Marist High School as an example, right? In our first year in doing a virtual classroom with them, they had a lot of turnover because this technology and these advancements are very intimidating. So they didn't have anyone that was really equipped, and we couldn't train them fast enough to at least be our assistant even on the other end of that, right? So in that scenario, that was problematic, right? But so I'm saying, my answer is long-winded, but it's on the point that if it's just that we're teaching them virtually, remote, that is going to be problematic because who's going to keep them focused and controlled? Distractions are in milliseconds, not seconds, not minutes. It is milliseconds.
Right.
So, long-winded answer, but when it comes down to it, it also becomes money to keep these things afloat because every brick and mortar, no matter what business it is, are shutting down because everything is online.
Yeah, banks ran into that same problem. Like, just to kind of relate to it, the interesting thing was there was a period where banks shut down all their brick and mortars. They're like, we don't need this anymore. But then they started losing customers to the banks that did have a brick and mortar because people like having.
It's gonna happen again though.
Yeah, it just kind of went on a swing. Oh, you think it will?
Oh, I know it will.
Okay.
My wife is from China. If you haven't heard of WeChat, check it out.
Okay.
That runs China. You live on WeChat. WeChat money, you don't have cash in China. Banks are in a lot of trouble if they don't catch up on that because you have your cell phone and that's your bank.
I don't think I've ever heard of that.
Take a look.
All right.
Next Jersey City Tech Meetup.
All right. I like that.
I agree with what you're saying. I wanted to add to that. And look at the workforce. There are more jobs that you can work from home because of the internet. Why wouldn't education mirror that? Right?
It's already happening.
It is already happening. But there are so many families and students that rely on the school for food, for shelter, for health. And unless that gets solved, you can't remove that community factor from a brick and mortar.
It's a silver bullet.
To add to that,
right.
Silver bullet. There's even now, like, remote work is just starting, right? And so there's a lot of discipline that needs to exist in a company to be fully remote.
For sure.
And it's hard. And you have to fully commit and build processes around it. And people who are together in an office have to actually act like they're remote, so that way they don't keep the people who are remote out of the conversations that are happening. And if you can imagine that complexity on a company, and it still doesn't work in every company, it's very difficult to do. Some people get it right, other people don't. Now try to apply that to teenagers and children. and I feel like there's that part of remote learning and remote work is still being experimented on, and that the experimentation side on the business hasn't finished yet, so it's not baked as a thought. Personally, is my thought. I'm trying to add in some contrarian.
Yeah,
we're all dancing.
The thing that kind of comes to my mind though is when I think future into we're specifically thinking about EdTech, but when I think into the future as a technologist, I think about the clash of technologies. I think about ubiquitous internet. So right now we have to hook up with our cable providers and whatnot, but what if there was some sort of technological progression where you didn't need to do that, and all of a sudden everybody in the United States, no matter who you are, had broadband internet. And combining that with three-dimensional cameras. So right now, like we take our cameras, like, you know, we have wide angle HD, but what if it took the next leap to 3D cameras, which are currently taking on the market, and they're expensive and they're not integrated in your phone. But what if it took the next leap and the next set of like iPhones, maybe 2 iPhones from now, had a 3D camera? And then maybe VR, like, you know, all of a sudden it's reached a point where it's cost effective enough to be introduced as another. I think about the clash of different technologies, at least that I know about, that could potentially provide the things that you're looking for. Like when I imagine what a future could look like, I imagine that clash. And I also imagine that the technology becomes cheap enough in order to make it happen.
If I may.
Yeah.
So on that basis, what you're really talking about is the synergistic relationships that are going to be built between a smartphone, VR, AR, etc., right? But further to a couple points that have been made around accountability, that's really the key to it. So my company, slowly but surely, we've been becoming more and more with the remote. But what we've developed is we use WhatsApp. You've heard of that one, right?
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. But the point is,
on top of that one,
we do check in and check out kind of stuff, just a little things to be accountable. Some of them might see them as, in a sense, micromanaging, but if you're working remote, you have to have some kind of accountability. You know, but those things, they showcase to the team, the department that you're in, when you're checking in and checking out, that you're doing it. And you do it timely, right? But the same thing with students. If you can have them do more or less a checklist, you have, for us, we have engineering design notebooks that we share with all of our students, or all the groups, right? We can check that, right? And see if it's done. If it's not, you know, these kind of things happen.
Yeah.
So.
This has been fantastic. I speaking of accountability.
I think you need to point to that.
Oh, my fault.
Are we out of
I didn't know this.
I just wanted to add too that, you know, who knows where technology will be in 20, 30, 40 on years, but I think the classroom also does provide a lot of social emotional learning that is still really important, especially in the kind of youth, the developmental ages. And technology, I think, works well when it supplements that. And I remember even kind of a few years ago, I've got much younger siblings, and watching them kind of as social media was starting to blossom and kind of feeling like, oh, well, maybe they won't ever interact with their friends. They're always texting and talking online with their friends, but and you see like they're having a sleepover and they're all in separate corners texting each other rather than interacting. But I think we've kind of swung back a little bit from that, and that kind of the interaction, your social interaction, is really important. And a school it's one of the really important elements of a brick and mortar school. And I don't think this generation, I don't think the next couple generations is going to get to a point where they're not going to have to learn that to interact well with the world. And I think we can see the difference in the way people behave online and face-to-face with people, that really shows that face-to-face interaction is important. The trolling that goes on online is not something that happens as much face-to-face, so that face-to-face interaction is still critical and crucial to development.
Right.
You know what I think of is, you ever see Modern Family? They have like the little robot with the iPad. It has like the face. We're all just going to have one of those. Anyway, so I do want to open this up to questions. Does anybody want to throw something out to the panel? One question.
I'll press the mic around.
All right.
Wait, hold on. I'm going to throw a soap at you.
Late throw.
What kind of sense do you like? No, this is super fun. All right, ready? Are you ready? Actually, I almost got that.
Almost.
It's unusual.
Just a quick question. For the sort of tech that you've introduced into the classroom, I imagine it's probably going to be appealed to more by the higher performing students. For the students that maybe, because we still have lots of schools that struggle to have their students pass minimum competency tests. So why is it, if kids are smart enough that they can be doing like computer programming and they can be tackling these group projects, in tech, how is it that they're then unable to pass like minimum competency tests? That's the part I'm kind of like, if we can use this tech to engage the students, why do we still have many students just really struggling to just be able to get over the finish line?
So if I might start off with this one. So 2 points you made is that they're not the underperforming students. I would actually beg to differ on that. I'd say the beg to differ in the essence that these underperforming students are engaged in a different way. And what's going on in the classroom, it's all about engagement, right? So you need to talk their language, right? You need to engage with them in different ways. And there's not a one size fits all. What happens in most classrooms is everybody teaches one way, and that's the way they feel comfortable. When you're using a technologically advanced classroom, you're teaching in multiple ways, so you're actually able to capture a greater audience. Therefore, all tests and everything else improve ultimately in parallel. Versus right now we have a finite amount of people in the classroom, maybe 20%. We'll use that 80-20 rule that we all know. That's what's happening. So by introducing these things, you're at least actually giving greater chances to the ones that might have been potentially underperforming to perform.
I think it goes back to the fact that there is no silver bullet. There's no single answer that's going to make every student pass or find the way that's going to reach every student that easily. But the goal is to be able to reach more and more students in the classroom as well, and to better prepare more and more students for the future.
If I may, like you said too, the differentiation of instruction becomes very easy and very manageable for teachers using the technology. So you can have a classroom of 20 students, 3 of them are working on one video, 3 of them are working on another video, and 3 of them are working on another assignment, all tiered to their levels, all geared to not only reach them where they are, but to bring them up to where they should be. I think the other aspect is using the technology to really hone in and identify and target and then provide the interventions for students who may be struggling in certain areas. And there's a lot of technology out there that does just that, and I know that that software that we're using, I'm sure most schools across the country are using it, where we're trying to focus not on necessarily just like the testing skills, but what skills are they missing, what skills should they be leaving us with, and how can we get them to attain those skills. So it kind of does a dual role. It helps the teachers differentiate the instruction in one class setting, and it also helps us target those students with special needs.
Yeah, I'd like to. You want to add something?
I do want to add to that. Technology is a tool, and you can't, I don't think you can replace that human-to-human interaction. And while technology is a tool that makes it easier to differentiate and to meet the students where they are, there are many students who struggle to read and write and do simple math, and those skills need to be acquired before using a Chromebook. I mean, I teach lower elementary, and one of the fundamental skills is typing, is literally learning the letters and signing in. So I agree that you can differentiate instruction, but it takes a good 2 months for those little kids to be able to log in and be able to read and write before they get to that higher, I think the higher process of differentiating instruction and thinking. You have to start with the basics.
Yeah. I have one thing that. Oh, you know what? I'll just speak. I have a pretty good voice. So the first thing that comes to my mind, and I'm not an educator, but I will say the first thing that comes to my mind is that a student's success, a person's success, like individually, to be successful, there are a lot of external factors that go into play. And this is just my outside observation. Like I love getting in, and I love helping to teach people do things. But I have noticed, a kid goes home every day, and there's an entire home environment that they have to deal with. And there aren't a lot of, there's some not so great homes for kids, which aren't conducive to learning. And kids have needs that need to be met before they necessarily are able to take in the information on a day-to-day basis. And so like the people in the education industry, sometimes end up getting a bad rap for, they kind of take the heat for things that are kind of like outside of their control. Like you kind of have to work through it and really kind of understand, what does this kid need. And that's why I appreciate educators and the education industry so much, because like maybe things aren't going on so well at home, but at least in the classroom, there's a chance there. And I like how you worded that, is like, at least you're giving them a chance.
If I can piggyback off of that statement, and what it comes down to in my passive study with neuroscience is that key to success is about support and structure. And if you can figure out and actually hone in on what support and structure they're not getting at home, and you can give them that in any way, shape, or form, whether it's a buddy system, it's you directly, now you're giving that student a chance, versus just relying on technologies to take it. No, that's you. That's you, and figuring out and observing and then connecting with them, or having others connect with them in order to support, again, create a structure environment that everybody can thrive.
Yeah. I would say that's not, like, obviously not every student, but
no, not by any means, yeah. But it's definitely something. And now we're sitting in Jersey City. It's an urban school district, so when it comes down to it, to whatever research you want, but it's going to come down to it. That's going to be something that's going to happen.
Yeah. If I can just add one thing too, just to address your kind of holistic question, that not every student has the same skill sets, and not every student, some students really have a capacity for some things and not others, and I think that we as a society need to start being okay with that. I know that just from a personal standpoint, we have students who I have a student who can't pass a reading test, but he is the first person I go to anytime I need something done technology-wise, and I will literally have him set up. We did a parent workshop a few weeks ago, and he set up the computer for me because he has that kind of mindset, but he's not going to pass a reading test. And that's okay. He's going to be successful because he has a skill set that sets him apart from his peers, from the others. And he has a learning disability, which is he's something that he's going to struggle with. But at the same time, he's learned how to cope and how to deal with that enough to, again, I have confidence that he's going to be successful when he leaves us because of the skills that he's leaving us with. They may not look identical to the skills with the child sitting next to him, but as a holistic student, I think he's being very successful. So I think that too, we need to kind of change our mindset on how we judge success in the classroom and how we judge success of students leaving the classroom. It's just another perspective.
I do want to add to that as well, that everybody's good at different things, and it's that pendulum. Right now the big push is technology, and that's where a lot of focus and money and resources are being spent, but we can't forget about the humanities, the arts, the sciences, the reading, the writing, and it comes down to balancing.
I think we have another question.
That was a good question, by the way. Everybody had a lot to say.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, guys.
He made the soap.
I had a question, Kristen, similar to what you were touched upon it a little bit, about how technology might actually be changing curriculum slightly. So as I noticed, I heard that in recent years, cursive, like learning scripts, is no longer something that people are taught in schools, but how the use of technology and how incorporating technology is actually changing curriculum a bit for students.
Well, then I'm going to throw you something. I'm a terrible throw.
So who wants to take first?
I have a question. I don't have an answer, but did anybody, when I was in school, they taught us how to write a check. So I'm assuming
that skill is no longer.
That skill's
no, so now in New Jersey we added a course, or they added a course called personal finance. So you have to leave high school knowing how to do things like that and how to do your taxes, which I joke with my kids all the time that I'm going to trade places with them and I'm going to learn how to do that. Nobody has been willing to take me up on that, even though they all complain about the course. But I'm waiting for that one student who's willing to switch with me. So that is something that New Jersey was kind of noticing was a big deal.
As technology changes, like I'm just thinking.
I do have to ask the question though. Maybe I'm crazy for thinking this. Like, I grew up where they taught us cursive, but I sign my name maybe for, rent check every once in a while, but that's about it. That's like the only time that I use cursive.
Recognizable as cursive, really?
It is. My handwriting is terrible.
I'm on the same page, but there is an important element that we're missing here. Okay. So by taking away, again, those fundamental elements where you have kinesthetic learners, you have visual learners, and you have your auditory learners, right? Every one of those actually, again, connects with the brain, right? And the synapses are firing, right? In different ways. Again, everyone's different. And without these things, you take those away, again, maybe 20-30% of your classroom is at a loss.
So it's not necessarily about like what is going to be the most important, but maybe what could be engaging?
Could be detrimental, in the sense that, again, you have an entire classroom of, say, hopefully 20 more, that would be a nice number for a classroom, but the average is about 26 to 27, I believe, in New Jersey, as an example right now. And again, you could lose 8 to 12 of your students. Based on the percentages of visual, again, kinesthetic and auditory learners, I mean, your auditory learners are the lowest, usually. Your kinesthetic is second, and then your visual learners are actually reverse that, I believe, actually. Yeah. So, but the point is that you take away one of those elements, you're not working on even cursive. That cursive is that you're writing out your thoughts. Again, now you're firing synapses for that one student in a different way, right? Versus typing on a keyboard, again, might not engage them as well, and also be a long-term memory.
One, because cursive is something that I've fought for in our district because, it's very quick to replace it with typing because, well, that's what they need. But cursive is one of those bigger umbrella things, because if we raise students who can't read cursive, then that brings, not only can you not try to sign your rent check, but you can't read a historic document, which I think as a literature major kind of breaks my heart, because how can you read a primary source? That's really troubling from like a holistic perspective. In terms of how we can try to integrate technology into the classroom, I think one of the things that has been changing most rapidly is our elective courses. So trying to offer, even at the elementary level, we integrated computers, even at the kindergarten level now. And they learn typing and things like that, so that by the time they hopefully get to 3rd grade, they're not still learning that skill. But that kind of goes along with, there's ways to incorporate that into the curriculum. It goes with letter recognition. So if you're learning typing, you're also reinforcing the letter recognition skills that you're learning in the gen ed classroom. So it's kind of ways like that you kind of try to balance, what technology facets do we need to teach, and how can we integrate them into the important standards on our curriculum. So that's kind of how we've been trying to integrate it.
Yeah. I do think curriculum should be intuitive, where it's ever changing. You're as an educator or an administrator or a curriculum writer, you're considering what do students need by the time they graduate to be prepared for the workforce? What does that look like? And it's probably a little bit technology, and it's probably a lot of those soft skills of being able to evaluate and judge and ask questions and synthesize their learning, rather than a linear curriculum that just has an end point.
How are we doing on time?
Oh, we could do like 2 or 3 more questions.
All right, cool.
Sure. Do I get myself? So I guess, Kristen, you might be the best to answer this. So I'm an educator at the university level, and I started around the time of the smart board being released. And one of the things that made me really anxious about it was like it wouldn't work, and then you'd call IT, and then they would be closed for the day, and you couldn't. So it got to a point where I was like, you know what, the anxiety and stuff was just like, I don't even want to use this anymore. And you had mentioned anxiety before, and a lot of teachers kind of have a little bit of a fear of technology. So I guess like it's like a loaded question, but it's like, how do how do all of the teachers get on the same page? Like the teacher who's a little bit older, who has a flip phone, who now has to use all of this technology. How do you get everybody on the same? I mean, my guess is teacher education programs are incorporating this into college and graduate school curriculum. But beyond that, like what kind of conversations does staff have in terms of?
They're all loaded questions. I do think it starts with support. It really does. Just like as a teacher with teaching children, you have a room full of children and they all have different needs, and you apply that same thinking to a business, to a school. You know, what does one teacher need to be successful in order to prepare their students? So I do think it comes down to support. I also, you touched on this earlier, I think it comes down to modeling. You know, if I can't tell you to use Google Classroom if I have no idea how to use it, and you keep practicing. I also, loaded question, I also think that parents and guardians need to be involved, because you know, what students are doing in school is not necessarily what's happening at home. Yep. And we are a team, you know, educators, parents, children, community, we are a team, and we all it needs to be supported in every way.
Yep. I agree with that.
Go for it.
To just kind of add on to that, so at Sawyer, since we are very much on the outside of school, what we end up seeing is that parents are pushing for more things to be used, because they want information, they want to know, they want to be involved, and honestly, there's like no technology that makes that easy for anyone. And the biggest thing that I've learned about whether it's a business that's education specific or a school is that time is the only thing they do not have any more of. And so introducing anything new is immediately raise the anxiety level up, because, oh crap, I have to learn how to use this. Right. And so I think that's a really hard problem to solve, and that's the barrier you're crossing whenever you're trying to introduce a new technology. But also, like, technology half the time doesn't work, right? How many times have you been in seriously, like, you've been in a conference room, Apple TV went out a minute ago, and this is a tech meetup. So it's like, sorry.
Call it out, call it out.
Tell us how you really think that raises anxiety, right?
Absolutely.
Right.
And I was in a meeting earlier today, and it was all technical people, 4 engineers, couldn't figure out how to get the TV to work. So it's like, now multiply that times children in a room, pressure cooker, anxiety. I still have to do all these other things, and that's usually where I tend to see that, like, technology makes a big mistake, where it's like, we think this is better, but it's now extra. It's an added thing you have to do, and like, if you just did it, it would be better, but like, no one is going to do that. So coming at it from a different perspective, where you're almost trying to remove things from their path, is the approach that I feel like successful at tech. And
I just had to explain to my mom yesterday how to sign up for Gmail. She was like, and to her, she was still on like, oh, I got to download all these all these photos onto the computer, and I can save them there. And I said, Mom, why don't you use Google Photos? It'll automatically sync. You just delete them right off your phone. She's like, I don't know how to do that.
It's too many steps forward.
That's
that's
what is the cloud?
Getting anybody to adopt any software is too many steps forward.
I mean, a few questions back here.
Oh yeah.
Too.
So, in the interest of time, I actually originally had 4 questions. And so I'm just going to pick the first one that I wrote down here. So the background in my hobby and the group that I'm actually organizing Meetup for this Friday is, every time I often speak to technological educators, I hear things such as entrepreneurship and building code bases and stuff, but the thing that I often don't hear that I advocate for is the field of securing those devices. The fact that that industry, which I'm very familiar in, it keeps expanding, and there's so many jobs, but there's like no one qualified in them, and it kind of all starts at, even to some degree, the middle grade school level. And I've taught like 10 to 12-year-olds about how to, here's a server, this is what it is, how to secure it, here's how a physical door works and stuff like that. So my question is that, have any of your organizations have looked into training our future security fields, and if not, is that a pathway that you'd be interested to introduce education-wise?
I can take it if you guys don't want to.
So ultimately, what you're referring to, of course, is cybersecurity.
Yeah, I mean, I also do physical security.
security too.
Okay. But when it comes down to it, I mean, one of our first interns at my company from NJIT was actually one of the first that got the full scholarship and stipend, etc., to go into the FBI CAA. And that's something that, again, people don't really realize at this point is something that's quite crucial.
Yeah.
And that's really more of educating the marketplace on that element versus the technology. Everybody realizes there's plenty of technologies out there, and that's kind of overwhelming as it is. But it's a matter of educating the population on that element in order to actually get that to be at the forefront versus really the back burner, right? Is what you're getting at. So in our company, I don't personally do it, but the rest of my team does because they're engineers, and they always tell me my passwords are point blank not good enough. so they, they say, Mike, don't use things that you know you like. You know, things as simple as that. But
You're using WeChat.
Well, yeah, we don't use WeChat for that, and WhatsApp, we probably, we don't use we don't put things on there as an example, and that's fundamental practices that you need to actually then, again, educate your team on and everyone you know. But again, it's time will only tell, and that will become, I think, more of a hot topic over the next couple of years versus right now, honestly, it's not.
My concern is I often see a chicken and the egg thing where people have the same thing with video games where people don't go in the field because they don't know it exists. There's a dearth of jobs, so people want it, but then they don't know it exists. So that's always just been my concern. But thank you for your insight.
Oh, absolutely.
Really quickly. One thing I just want to add is that I sort of feel like one thing that we forget is that schools and teachers are working on a 20-year time horizon, and technology has just exponentially gotten faster. So what I learned in grade school and grammar school and high school was obsolete by the time I got to college. And I feel like there's a difference between including stuff like cybersecurity in the fundamentals of teaching versus, because they can say the same thing about data science. That's just because right now that's the job everybody wants, but 20 years from now it may be something totally different, and that I think is where it becomes so difficult in schools, because we don't know what it is and we work in tech, so why should we expect a school to know what to teach a kid that 20 years from now, it's so rapidly changing. But I do think that my sister's a teacher, so she has this issue where she has to teach kids about protecting your online identity, because that's social teaching. It's not specific to the cybersecurity, or I feel the same way about teaching coding. The language I learned when I was learning how to code died, and then the language I learned after that died, and the language I'm writing today I had to learn a year ago. And so part of coding is really teaching about the fundamentals of logic and the fundamentals of those kinds of things. So I feel like it's kind of unfair to put them in that position to be like, you have to teach my kid what they're supposed to do 20 years from now, because no one knows.
But I also think that I don't think it's necessarily the school's responsibility to do that, but I think that's why after school programs are important, is because they can be a little more flexible and they can adapt more and they can supplement what's going on in a classroom. We do content creation primarily, and it's very social media driven because of that, and that's because that's really big right now. There's a chance that in 10 years we'll all be sick of Instagram, and we'll have to rebrand ourselves as something else to continue to exist. But we were able to do that. We were able to recognize a need that some of these students weren't getting in the community, and to start up relatively quickly and to get a program off the ground a lot faster than a school could, because we didn't have the other responsibilities that a school does.
I don't know how to answer that question, but the student who figures out how to hack or get into the system, you should talk to them and teach them the other side of it, because you have the skills are there.
Actually, I was just talking about there's an ethics aspect that isn't taught in computer science.
Right.
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah.
So we actually integrated ethical behavior into our computer science classes starting in 6th grade. That's one whole section. So one whole unit is on ethical computing. Because that does play kind of, when you spiral the curriculum, it is important to think about what you're doing and why you're doing it.
That's great. We have one question over here, then we'll wrap up a final question.
Hi, as a father of a 6-year-old, I'm fascinated by seeing the technology that he uses growing up and how it helps him to learn things in a different way, in a different pace than when I was little. So for example, educational games like Singapore Math and other things that help him to really engage, and like somebody said earlier, they interact with this in a way that we, cannot do. So instead of doing everything in the classroom, one thing I don't see a lot of is the curriculum actually proposing things to parents, because everybody's got a phone at home or a computer, or a lot of families do. What about using those existing resources and actually pointing to some of these things? And maybe a question for Andrew in particular, for the Sawyer platform, you connect students or parents with opportunities, but do you do that for software or for these kinds of online learning possibilities?
So today we don't, but we don't really draw the line on what an education business or an education provider is. Online learning is important. I think online, like taking it past just like the class ends and now you're back home, that's usually where these things fall off. But part of it is that there's gonna be more of these platforms that exist. It's just the laws of startups. There's just gonna be 100 of them in like 2 years, which is why I'm here now trying to make it work. But it's hard for everyone to know what they should be doing, and this part of Sawyer's mission is to sort of understand the entire spread of the ecosystem, to be able to then say, here's what we're seeing, and not be sort of prescriptive either, because we're not educators, but we work with all the educators, and so we see the trends that are happening, and we see that the STEM classes are now becoming more important in summer camps, where another thing was sort of trending downwards, and there really isn't anything that to date has existed to look at that information. But you can get restaurant things and you can get gym things, and so our approach is really like, if we make it easier for people to just feel like there's things to do, then more people will do them, and then we can help put more people into those things by working with schools after the fact, sort of like honestly coming at it from the outside of the school perspective and just wrapping around it to get, because if parents are involved, they're going to be vocal into the schools. So sorry, it's going to happen.
I will say, it doesn't matter. We're kind of, we as people are like new to that entire premise. The idea that there are technology devices in the home and that the school extends beyond the classroom hours. We're the first generation where a teacher, or the classroom walls extend beyond just when class is in session, right? When I was growing up, class ended, go home, there's no interaction with the teacher, right? Email had just started to come up when I was, but it wasn't ubiquitous, not like it is today. And even email is starting to flail a little bit. But the idea is that we're new, and I think that it's going to take some time in order for people. We probably won't even get to catch up by the time like some other aspect or some revolutionary thing comes along and changes the entire landscape for us. I just think it's moving too quickly for us to be able to provide the resources to make adults, or to help support adults.
And also, we're the first generation where this is a table stakes as a parent. So you have Uber, you have Seamless, you have all this stuff, and you now have a child, and you're like, there's something missing, right? There's a piece that's missing because it's all the other things have it. And so that's why I think over the next probably like 5 years, you're going to see a big rise in technology companies that are focused on the family and education and school and connecting all those things. We think about ourselves similar to like the restaurant industry in 2000 or in the 90s when OpenTable just launched for booking reservations, there was no internet. They had like dial-up internet. So like the idea of online reservation didn't make any sense. And now no one does it without doing that. And so like that has sort of seeped into every part of our life except this. And now that we all have phones in our pocket, and now it's just an expectation. So the market is going to create this, it's already creating this demand.
Yeah, and I would say that it's already moving in that direction. I mean, we subscribe to a bunch of apps that we push out to parents because they can utilize them just as much as the students can. They can see what the students are doing in real time. Singapore Math is, I know, one that we used to use, Raz Kids, Splash Math, are all different apps that the parents can have on their phones or their iPads or whatever devices they have at home to kind of reinforce that learning if they did want to do that. I think one of the biggest barriers, at least for us, is that we kind of need to be very strategic in which programs we're purchasing, because a lot of them do come with a hefty purchase price, and a lot of them are very similar. So I know that I hear from parents like, well, why don't you have this math instead of that math? Well, because we did the research and we went with, we had to strategically make financial decisions to make sure that not only did we have a math app, but we also had an literacy app. So, those are some of the barriers that at least I'm experiencing now, that we're trying to be strategic with what apps we're getting and which apps we're pushing out to parents.
If I could piggyback on
I have a question. Yeah, just one last question, but anyone else afterwards, hopefully you can stick around and kind of chat with them and kind of get some more info. We're going to go to the pet shop after for a happy hour, so hopefully a lot of the panel speakers will be there and you can kind of pick their brains there. But just one more question, kind of looking at time. I'll show the mic there. Do this.
So as a high school student, I feel that school is important, but it hasn't really changed. It's the same system for generations, and quite frankly, I feel like I waste my time.
I was there too.
I feel like I don't need to be there for 8 hours. It is something very specific I would like to do with my life. I do clothing. I very recently picked up on coding, and I spend about 3 hours a night learning it myself. I purchased a book on Python, and it's good. So why haven't schools really looked forward and realized that students don't want to do this, they want to focus on a career, and instead of wasting all this time on the bare minimum, you can learn this at a young age. Like younger, I learned how to read and write when I was 6. I don't need to keep learning the same thing over and over. Why don't they introduce a mentor? Like, I'm in the CCA, so their mentors, I feel, would be a good option. And why haven't schools looked into that?
That's a great question. Who wants to take it?
Waste of time.
It's a fun, fun one. I'll just have fun with it, to be honest. But it comes down to point blank bureaucracy for one, but I won't get into political elements by any means. But when it comes to it, everybody's afraid of change and intimidation for the classroom. People don't want to necessarily move forward that quickly. We don't know what's next. We are not fortune tellers. We can't tell what's 20 years away, like all of us have said. So it comes down to the fundamental elements. They need to prepare you for what they believe is next versus what they know is next, right? You have probably a better inkling of what is actually you're going to be needing as skills in order to be successful in life versus honestly the school and the teacher, because they have more, not to say important things, but they have more things they have to focus on in order to prepare you for other things in life, where we leave it to you as an educator, for that matter, in a sense, to allow you to make those decisions. Is the time length, further to that, your length of time in school, that was something that was set up over 90 years ago.
That's what I'm saying.
So is it outdated? By all means, potentially. But again, I'm gonna not cross that line by any means. But when it comes down to it, you're not right nor wrong when it comes down to it, because we don't know, again, what's next in the next 20 years. But more power to you. I have a kid that's from Lincoln High School that is now a manufacturing associate making my 3D printers in my manufacturing facility. He was in my class at 14, 15. I hired him as an intern at 16 and 17 because he had an interest in this. But it's a matter of you seeing and creating those pathways for yourself. And that's what more students like yourself, and you should commend yourself for that, need to do, and take that initiative and be proactive in life to do so. When it comes to school, we can, as teachers, teachers, schools in general, they can only prepare you for so much. Ball's in your court when it comes down to it, right, in life. So that's my answer.
I feel that there's so much competition and so little time, because by the time you're 20, you're expected to have your whole life figured out, which is ridiculous. I mean, for me, I have it, but most people, you know, I don't know what the hell they're doing. So they should really focus on careers, because
it's career pathways when it comes down to it.
You just gotta figure out tomorrow and keep coding, bro. That's it. You don't have to figure out the rest of it.
I mean,
one step at a time, and you
just
go.
to reiterate what you said, like more power to you for like finding out that and taking that initiative. I think that's and that's the most important thing, and that's also something. It's an important thing to learn that that's how life works too. You know, it's like school is prescribed for you, but you get out to the real world, and then you are expected to be proactive in figuring out what you want to do. So it's beyond learning the skills that you want to learn. You're learning a good skill in creating that pathway for yourself.
And for parents, I believe they should realize that too. If their child doesn't want to really, if they really know what they want to do, you like have the conversation and like pull them out of school and put them in something that will actually advance their skill set and what they want to do.
I just want to add one thing to sort of defend school a little bit, is that
I'm not like
I understand. I think though the one thing that people you don't realize until later is that there's certain parts of learning the basics. Like think about coding, right? You have to learn the basics so that you can learn any language later, because you know that that language is going to be dead in 5 years because technology changes so rapidly, and we discount the things we learn in school because they're not applicable right now. But I remember saying out loud to my high school teachers, like, I'm never going to use algebra. Coding wasn't that big at that time. I was involved. I was like coding and learning, and then I started trying to make a game as a college student, and I realized that it's mostly algebra, and I was like, crap, like I didn't know what I was going to use it for, but having it in your tool set is important to recognize too, because like you get inspiration from all these different places, and you may not know what you're going to use that thing you just learned in that English class or that humanities class at that moment, but 10 years from now you're going to look back and you're going to be like, I actually know the answer to how to solve this problem in whatever I'm doing because of this one obscure thing I learned. And it's like, it's really just like, think about it as fundamentals. Think about it as learning the if statement, the syntax, the how to use the variables, because then the next language is just take those fundamentals and learn the cool new thing that they built on top of it. And I feel like school sometimes gets a bad rap when you don't think about it as learning that sort of underlying piece. Does that make sense?
You know, just to piggyback off that, I think that it's also about teaching life skills. And, you know, a lot of what we do in life, and I'm sure all of us in the workplace, a lot of times we have to do things that we don't want to do, that we don't agree with, that we think are pointless or useless, but we have to do them for the betterment of whatever the case may be. We have to learn how to show up to places on time. We have to learn how to deal with bosses or teachers or colleagues. So a lot of it is not just the content that you're learning, but also the atmosphere and kind of the life skills that you're learning, how to be resilient and how to problem solve and how to think critically. So I would make that argument for schools too, but I do think that you make a really good point. I think, you know, about 20 years ago or so, we shifted away from like a vo-tech option where it was more like career training for a lot of students, and the pendulum swung a little bit too far into the academia. So I think that that's something that, and I think that school districts have already started going back towards that with the career training. So I think that that students like you would be on the forefront of something like that and making that change kind of happen for future generations.
Yeah. Well, we do need to kind of close things up, and what I want to do, I'm going to turn things over to Ben to like do the closing. But I want to say thank you guys. This was a lot of fun. And to the audience member, please connect with us. You know, everybody here is really friendly. Maybe I'll just speak for myself, I guess. But you please approach me, connect with my community. You know, I am Koding Kurriculum we're going to be holding. We're trying to build an educational technology community here in Jersey City and expanding other places. Please be a part of it. The conversation we love. It relies on multiple perspectives. So not just technologists, not just educators, it's parents. Like it's students. It's everybody is invested in this like educational system. And so you know, any way that I can help or Koding Kurriculum can help, please reach out, ask a question. Friendly guy. So anyway, I just want to say thank you.
Everyone give it up for the speakers, guys. Woo! All right, guys, thank you so much for coming out. Give it up one more time for the speakers. They've been great. Woo! Really appreciate having everyone come here. It's great to see the Jersey City community come together for this really important topic. Good timing, ambulance. Appreciate it. Anyway, yeah, we got the celebration, guys. We're going to the pet shop afterwards for a little after party to keep the conversation going. So if anyone wants to come out for a few drinks, just say you're at the Jersey City Tech Meetup, and you get happy hour all night long. Check us out, JC Tech Meetup on Instagram to kind of see what's coming up. And on that note, join us on December 19th for our holiday year close special. So we're going to have a lot of fun. It's going to be a celebration. So just come to celebrate the year of awesome achievements that we've made in Jersey City. So thanks everyone for coming out, and have a great night. We'll see you at Pet Shop.
Thanks, but first and foremost,